Hello, this is Dr. Mark Baxter with Baxter Health Center. Thank you for joining me today for my webinar on decreasing cancer risk with hormone balance, healthy diet and lifestyle choices, and nutritional supplements. I think you get a lot out of this segment today. There's a lot to learn and a lot you can do to help protect yourself from the terrible menace of cancer. What is the risk of cancer? Well, in the United States, it's 50% for men and 33% for women. Now, although men have an increased risk of cancer compared to women, a lot of that cancer risk for men is prostate cancer, which is very slowly developing in most cases and can be prevented fairly easily. But not every man has a 50% risk of cancer, and not every woman has a 33% risk of cancer, because we all have biochemical individuality. That means we all have different chemical and genetic makeup in our body. It's influenced by our genes, it's influenced by our choices on diet, lifestyle, and other things. And even our genetics is influenced by the choices we make in diet and lifestyle, mood and emotions. There are many different types of cancer, and each cancer has different types of risk factors. The risk factors include genetics, environmental factors such as pollution, lifestyle choices such as how much you exercise, how much water you drink, and dietary choices. For example, how much food do you eat that's prepared and processed in ways that aren't natural to the way we evolved? And on the other hand, how many dietary choices do you make that are unrefined, unprocessed, eating the food as close to the tree, shrub, or ground as possible? And the choices we make can have a tremendous impact on decreasing our risk. So what we really have to ask ourselves is, what risk factors do we have control over? We don't really have control over our genetics. However, the good news is that genetics rarely force us to develop cancer. Even if you have a family history where many of those in your family have developed cancer, that does not mean you have to. Although genetics can make cancer more likely, they can predispose us to cancer. By and large, our genes respond to our internal environment, which is greatly affected by our external environment. And our genes also respond to the external environment too. The weather, the temperature, pollutants, that kind of stuff. So certain things we can change that affect our genes. We can have some choice on the air we breathe, the water and other beverages we drink, the food and nutrients we eat, and the food and nutrients we don't eat. Even the thoughts and emotions we have can affect our risk of cancer, as well as other diseases. And we have a lot of influence over those choices. So how do we change the air we breathe? Well, number one, we can choose to not smoke, choose to not get married to someone who smokes, choose to work in a place with good air. And if you work in a place that doesn't have good air, you can choose to leave that, or hopefully motivate the management to change the quality of the air. You can also choose to improve the air quality where you live. I always use the term buy a filter or be a filter. Your body will filter the air that you breathe. It decreases the burden on your body and decreases the pollutants you're exposed to if you pre-filter that air. And you can buy what's called HEPA filters, high efficiency particulate air filters, HEPA, H-E-P-A. They're reasonably priced. You can find them on the internet with a Google search or at various stores. And you can buy those large enough to filter the air in the whole house, or if you want to decrease the burden on your budget, at least buy a filter for your bedroom where you spend approximately 8 hours every day sleeping. You should also check the air in your room, in your home, for radon. Now, it's basements that are much more likely to accumulate radon because it comes from the ground, and it can come through the cement walls and the flooring of a basement. It's easy to check for radon. You can get free test kits, actually, at a website at the University of Nevada, Reno, at www.unce.unr.edu/radon. And it's very easy and inexpensive to test that. And then there are certain procedures you can take to eliminate radon from your home environment, because radon can increase the risk for lung cancer. Well, we can also affect our internal environment by what choices we make on the water and other beverages we drink. Now, it's important for everybody to drink plenty of water, and by and large, you want to drink half your weight in ounces of water each day. So for a man that weighs 180 pounds, he should drink 90 ounces of water. A woman who weighs 120 should drink at least 60 ounces of water every day. And again, the adage, buy a filter or be a filter, holds true. Our groundwater is contaminated with formaldehyde, drugs, pesticides, herbicides, ammonium perchlorate, and all sorts of other chemicals. You know where the formaldehyde comes from, the groundwater? From leaky caskets in cemeteries. Gross thought, I know. But I just mentioned that hoping to motivate some of you who aren't attentive to drinking clean water and are drinking tap water to get some form of filtration. And here in the Las Vegas Valley, the rocket fuel factory that blew up several years ago, Pepcon, they had released a lot of ammonium perchlorate into the soil, which percolated into our groundwater. And that's a particular toxin for the thyroid gland. So reverse osmosis is a decent form of water filtration. It takes about 97% of the fluoride out of the water. I know you've been told by our good government that fluoride is good for you. It helps protect cavities. What they don't tell you is it's the active ingredient in rat poison. It's neurotoxic, and I refuse to put it in my body. And reverse osmosis will take out about 97% of the fluoride. Distilled water is best. It takes out 100% of everything except the water. So it leaves you with pure, fresh water. But distillation units are more expensive, and they use more energy than reverse osmosis. So for most people, reverse osmosis is about as good as they want to get. You can also drink herb teas as a good healthy beverage. You want to make sure you drink alcohol in moderation, if at all. You want to limit that to 1 drink per day. It's best if that drink is not in the evening, best if it's during the noon meal. Red wine is best. You want to avoid mixed drinks. And you want to realize that consuming alcohol with the evening meal or at nighttime decreases growth hormone production by 97%. And without adequate growth hormone, you can't make enough of any of the other hormones. Testosterone for men, estrogen and progesterone for women, adrenal hormones, thyroid hormones, they're all affected by decreasing in growth hormones. So it would really be advisable to not drink alcohol, at least not regularly, with your evening meal or at nighttime. Now, the food and nutrients we eat also affect our internal environment. You want to eat organic fruits and vegetables whenever possible, because pesticides, herbicides, and other chemicals are toxins, and a lot of them are carcinogenic. In addition, organic fruits and vegetables have higher nutrient density. They contain much more nutrients, like vitamins and minerals, than non-organic fruits and vegetables. In fact, many studies show that organic fruits and vegetables have about 400% more nutrients in them than the fruits and vegetables raised inorganically. So although you pay more for it, you get a lot more for your money as well as not getting the carcinogenic toxins. And some of those toxins, in addition to being carcinogenic, have a hormonal effect. They act like estrogens, very, very potent estrogens, which also increase the risk of cancer, but it has hormonal effects. In strong enough doses, it can actually cause men to grow breasts. Not a good thing. So you want to eat plenty of fiber and phytonutrients every day. And they recommend at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. That's the recommendation of the American Heart Association. American Cancer Society recommends at least 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. But the emphasis should be on vegetables, not on fruits. A lot of people love the fruits because of the sugar in it, and they can actually get too much sugar in their diet by focusing mostly on fruits. So make sure that you emphasize vegetables with these 5 to 10 servings you get each day. And it's not just the phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals in those fruits and vegetables we need. It's the fiber as well, and the fiber helps decrease the risk of colon cancer as well as other cancers. Some processed foods are healthy, such as extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, purified cold water fish oil concentrate, referred to as EPA, DHA, and of course high-quality nutritional supplements are highly processed, but those are good for us. So not everything that's processed is bad, but we definitely want to emphasize those foods that are unprocessed or minimally processed as much as possible. Now you want to limit your exposure to xenoestrogens. These are estrogen-like compounds that are found in plastics, pesticides, herbicides. So for your food storage containers, for leftovers, much better if you replace those plastic containers with glass. Even the glass ones will have plastic lids. That's okay as long as you don't let the plastic lids touch the food inside. Or if you wrap the glass with plastic wrap, don't let the plastic wrap contact the foods inside. You want to make sure that before you put the lid or the plastic wrap on top of the glass container, you first let the food cool off. Otherwise, steam from the food rises up to the plastic wrap or plastic top, condenses against that surface, and then the liquid water that results falls back down onto the food, contaminating it with xenoestrogens from the plastic. You want to make absolutely certain you do not heat your food in the microwave in anything but glass with a paper towel over the top. Never have plastic wrap or a plastic top over a glass or Pyrex bowl in the microwave, because the microwave energy tends to free up some of the chemicals in the plastic so that it contaminates the food. And then you want to make sure that you use only healthy plastics in your home, whether for drinking water bottles or other items. Types 2, 4, and 5. Those numbers are imprinted or embossed inside of that plastic recycling triangle. And you want to avoid plastics with bisphenol A, styrene, and PVC. Those are found in plastics 1, 3, and 6. And when you're using chemicals with your hands, when you're using chemicals with your hands, you want to make sure that you protect your hands with rubber gloves, or if you're allergic to rubber or latex, then you can use gloves made out of nitrile, which is a little tougher and a little less permeable to chemicals. And you want to protect yourself from breathing fumes with the appropriate breathing mask, or from breathing particulates, like if you're sanding furniture and paint particulates get in the air, or dust in the air. You want to make sure that you at least have a decent dust mask to wear so you don't suck those particulates down into your lungs. Because once they contact the lung tissue, chemicals for those particulates get into your bloodstream, and some of them are carcinogenic. Now, another aspect of our internal environment that a lot of people ignore is obesity. Obesity increases the risk for many different forms of cancer. It contributes to inflammation, and inflammation contributes to the risk for cancer, as well as the risk of cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease, and many other diseases of aging. Obesity also contributes to hormonal imbalance because fat cells make more estrogen, and that additional estrogen can throw your balance of hormones off in women in addition to men. Now here's a diagram that shows the evolution of the human species. It appears that we're definitely moving toward the right. The gentleman with a big gulp and a big belly. And one has to ask yourself, are natural nutraceuticals potent enough for today's health challenges? And I'd suggest that they are, as long as they're combined with appropriate diet and lifestyle choices. Well, in addition to all the other effects against health, excess body fat indicates, as I indicated before, increases the level of estrogen, and this can result in estrogen dominance, which predisposes women towards various forms of cancer as well as other hormone imbalance symptoms, and can also contribute for men's risk of prostate cancer as well as other cancers. So how do we determine whether or not we've got estrogen balance or hormonal balance in general? First, you need to assess your current hormone status, and we do that with saliva testing. They're the most accurate and they have the most information because they measure only the free or active form of the hormone. In addition, the tests that I order measure all three estrogens, not just estradiol, which is the potent estrogen that most people refer to when they're talking about estrogen, but it also looks at estrone and estriol. Estrone is a weaker estrogen, but it's not a good one if it's in excess. And it's along the pathway of estrogen detoxification. So if an individual has too much estrone, they generally have a problem with detoxifying estrogen. And there are certain nutrients and diet and lifestyle changes we can recommend to help improve their ability to metabolize and excrete the estrone from their bodies. Estriol is also another weak estrogen, but as opposed to estrone, which is bad for you, estriol is protective against certain forms of cancer. And then we look at progesterone, testosterone, and something called DHEA, which is a building block hormone that the adrenals make, that the body uses to create other hormones. Now here's a sheet from one of the hormone testing companies that talks about why women should consider getting a female hormone panel. If you have symptoms like weight gain, infertility, osteoporosis, endometriosis, ovarian cysts, uterine fibroids, fibrocystic breasts, if you've got a family history of increased risk of breast cancer, or recurrent cycle-related symptoms and irregularities such as PMS, migraines, breast tenderness, and brain function, cognitive issues like forgetfulness, moodiness, insomnia, spotting between periods. These are all symptoms of hormonal imbalance and are strong indicators that a woman suffering from these symptoms should definitely have a hormone panel run to see where the imbalance is so that we can find out what we need to do to fix it. Now, for women approaching menopause, for women in the perimenopause time period of their lives, which tends to start around the age of 45, but can occur earlier in some women and later in some women, we look at the same hormones. The way we collect the sample is a little bit different. But again, if they've got irregular cycles or other symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, things like that, breast tenderness, uterine fibroids, things like that. And this test can be very revealing on exactly what types of imbalances are occurring and what we can do to help ease a woman through that transitional time in her life. And then women, once they've completed menopause, they also need to make sure they have hormonal balance because they're just as much, if not more likely, to have various hormone imbalances after they've completed menopause. And those hormonal imbalances can cause all sorts of discomfort as well as increase the risk of cancer. So in my opinion, every woman, once she's completed menopause, should have a hormonal test to make sure that her hormones are in balance, even if she doesn't have any obvious symptoms. At least one test to make sure everything's okay. Very inexpensive insurance. Well, something we need to pay attention to is not just that the hormones are in the normal range, but that they're in the proper ratio with each other. Because I've had women who have high normal estrogen, low normal progesterone. Their physicians that they'd been going to told them that they were fine because their hormones were normal. Unfortunately, being that the ratio was off, they were at increased risk of uterine fibroids and uterine cancer. And one of them actually contracted uterine cancer shortly before she started seeing me. So it's very important that these hormones not only be within the normal range, but that they have the proper ratio with each other. And you need to work with a doctor that knows what those ratios are. Because the ratio of estrogen to progesterone determines the uterine proliferation index, or the likelihood with which you could develop uterine fibroids or uterine cancer, and the ratio of testosterone to estrogen plus progesterone, where 90% of that number is estrogen and 10% is progesterone, determines the breast proliferation index, or the likelihood of developing fibrocystic breast disease and or breast cancer. Here are the test results on one particular patient of mine. And if you look down here, what we are interested in, this woman was postmenopausal. If you look at estradiol of 20, the target range for hormone replacement therapy, or a woman that we want to have optimal hormone levels, she's a little above that. She's 20, but you'll notice that if she was in the luteal phase, 7 to 20 is normal, so 20 isn't that high, but it's above the optimal range of 5 to 13 for a postmenopausal woman. You take a look at progesterone of 88, and here the hormone replacement therapy range for optimal hormonal balance is between 100 and 300. So she is definitely below the optimal range with progesterone and above the optimal range with estradiol. Neither of these numbers is alarmingly high or low. Nevertheless, this is the patient I was telling you about that developed uterine cancer, and she needed a hysterectomy. Fortunately, they got the cancer in time, and it turns out she'll be just fine. But it just illustrates how essential it is that these hormones not just be normal, but they be in optimal balance with each other. Now, this is a graph of the breast proliferation and uterine proliferation indices that I referred to earlier for the same patient. And with her estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone levels as they are, you can see that the black square in the breast proliferation index is in zone 2, which is associated with a high proliferative potential or increased risk of breast cancer. And under the uterine proliferation index, you'll see again she's in zone 2, which resulted from high estrogen, low progesterone, and again high proliferative potential. So she was at high risk of uterine proliferation or uterine cancer, and she got the uterine cancer. Now, if that's all they did was the hysterectomy, she would still be at increased risk of breast cancer because her estrogen is still too high. So she needed nutrients and diet and lifestyle changes to help decrease her estrogen load in order to bring her breast proliferation index numbers back down into the optimal zone. So you can have hormone imbalance as a result from an excess of certain hormones, like estrogen dominance due to overweight or other causes, or it can be a result of a deficiency of certain hormones, like low progesterone. It can also result from an inability to properly detoxify estrogen in men or in women. And hormone balance is just as important for men as it is for women. Here's some information about a male hormone panel and some of the symptoms that men oftentimes suffer from when they're suffering from hormone imbalance is a loss of a sense of well-being, kind of just a nebulous sense that I just don't feel that good. A difficulty concentrating, depression, irritability and nervousness, other alterations in behavior, change in sleep habits, insomnia, a decrease in hair density, a reduction in muscle mass or beard thickness, a decline in sexual function, decreased sexual desire, and a decrease in bone mass, osteoporosis. These are all signs of decreased testosterone in men, and this can be easily dealt with. But first we need to find out if it's the problem. What are some of the beneficial effects of hormone balance in men? Well, it increases their sense of well-being and fitness. It helps them lose body fat. It increases muscle mass. It resolves libido or sexual desire problems. It prevents hair thinning. It increases red blood cell counts and the ability of the blood to carry oxygen. It increases bone density. It decreases cholesterol, total cholesterol. It increases the good cholesterol. And it decreases cardiovascular risk. Many people don't realize that adequate testosterone is necessary not just for healthy sex life, but to decrease the risk of heart attack and stroke. And the excessive estrogen levels in men can also contribute to the risk of prostate cancer. So it's not just low testosterone can lead to that risk, as well as increased estrogen levels and a possible inability to properly detoxify estrogen. So what happens when we balance hormones? Well, it decreases the risk of breast and uterine cancer in women and prostate cancer in men. It can also correct the underlying cause of many other conditions, not just physical, but mental, emotional conditions as well. There's two different models or contexts of care of hormone balancing. The replacement model is the most common model that's used by physicians, where those hormones that are deficient are given to the patient in a pill form or on a patch in a transdermal lotion, a potion, or an implanted pellet. The functional model of hormone balance, on the other hand, requires a more detailed understanding of the interactions affecting these hormones. Interactions not just between sex hormones, but between the sex hormones and adrenal and thyroid hormones, and the interaction of all of those with the diet and lifestyle choices that you're making, as well as with your body composition. And that's the model that I follow, because it helps me deal not just with hormonal deficiencies, but with hormonal excesses as well. If necessary, I can still replace deficient hormones if we can't bring them up naturally through diet and lifestyle choices and nutritional supplements. But we try more natural approaches first so that we can, as much as possible, leave the body in control of how much hormones are in your system. And if the body simply can't make adequate hormones, then we can still give you replacement hormones, always in the form of a natural, bioidentical hormone, exactly like the hormone your body used to make enough of on its own. So whether a doctor follows the replacement model or the functional model, it's an imperative that natural bioidentical hormones are used. Synthetic hormones made by drug companies just aren't the same as bioidentical hormones. I mean, why in the world would anybody want to put a foreign substance in the body when a natural substance is not only readily available, but safer and less expensive? As an indication of the risk that one has with these synthetic hormones, consider the fact that the Women's Health Initiative, which was a study of over 100,000 women several years ago, it was discontinued early because the synthetic hormones they were using, like Premarin, increased the incidence of cancer and cardiovascular disease. By the way, Premarin gets its name from pregnant mare's urine. Premarin comes from horse piss. They extract horse estrogen from horse urine, and that's what they were giving these women. Well, horse estrogen is not the same as human estrogen. It has certain estrogenic effects in the body, but in addition, it's concentrated by a factor of 50 times in human breast tissue. That's why it increases the risk of breast cancer, and it also increases the incidence of other cancers, as well as cardiovascular disease and stroke. Although bioidentical hormones are safer because they're natural, that doesn't necessarily mean they can be used indiscriminately or without professional expertise. And a lot of women take natural bioidentical progesterone lotion. That's not the best way to take progesterone. Progesterone tends to not be dangerous, but for various reasons, that's not the best way to dose progesterone. And I utilize different methods in my office. And if you come in for a visit, we can go over some of the particulars of why I choose a different form of progesterone from transdermal lotion. The key here is balance. And to get balanced function, we need to know where your hormone levels are and then we need to give you the right amount of bioidentical hormones, and then at least one check later on to make sure all the hormones are in their optimal range. Again, not just within the normal range, but with the optimal ratio with each other. Well, balanced estrogen levels are an important part of the picture, but in addition to being in the normal range and in the proper ratio with each other, estrogen has to be properly metabolized or detoxified in both men and women. And there are a lot of research articles about the importance of estrogen detoxification. Here's just a few of them. Whether you make it in your own body or take it in a pill, potion, lotion, or other form, estrogen has to be detoxified and excreted from your body, otherwise it can rise to toxic levels. This is true in both men and women. Excess body fat not only creates more estrogen, it creates an enzyme called aromatase, which converts testosterone into estrogen and can give men breasts. In addition, that increases the risk of prostate cancer. There are beneficial and non-beneficial, or healthy and unhealthy, pathways for estrogen detoxification, and these pathways can be modified with appropriate nutritional supplementation. In fact, it's abnormal estrogen detoxification pathways that's oftentimes associated with genetic inheritance. And this is one way that we can change the expression of the genes through nutritional supplementation so that we can take someone who used to be at increased risk of certain forms of cancers and, if not neutralize, at least greatly diminish that increased risk with appropriate nutritional supplementation, which helps to push the detoxification pathways along a healthier pathway that leads to decreased cancer risk. Healthy estrogen metabolism depends upon healthy liver function, so you want to treat your liver well. You want to avoid excess drugs, even legal drugs like aspirin, Advil, Aleve, Tylenol, and alcohol. Now, what are some of the nutrients that can help with estrogen metabolism? Well, cruciferous vegetables, that includes broccoli, cauliflower, arugula, which is a leafy green that looks kind of like baby spinach leaves, Brussels sprouts, bok choy. These are all cruciferous vegetables, and they've all been associated with decreased risk of cancer. Indole-3-carbinol and diindolylmethane are concentrated from cruciferous vegetables, and that decreases cancer risk. You can get pills of indole-3-carbinol and diindolylmethane. In just one pill, it has the nutrients from 8 pounds of broccoli. Now, there's no way that anybody's going to eat 8 pounds of broccoli per day, let alone day after day after day. But you can easily get the nutritional benefit from that much broccoli by taking one pill that has diindolylmethane and indole-3-carbinol. One tablet twice daily is the recommended dose and provides the amount of diindolylmethane from 16 pounds of broccoli. Now, other nutrients can also help. Soluble fiber and fiber from ground flaxseed helps bind excess estrogen in your gut and helps it being excreted. Avoiding saturated fats in your diet helps prevent the estrogen from being reabsorbed. And certain gut bacteria that some people have and others don't can encourage reabsorption of estrogen. And this action can be blocked with a nutrient called calcium D-glucarate. And we have some nutrients here that include indole-3-carbinol, diindolylmethane, and calcium D-glucarate, so that all those bases are covered. Medical foods that have certain nutrients that help with detoxification, as well as calcium D-glucarate, can also help with estrogen metabolism detoxification. Now, here we're going to switch to a different subject, vitamin D. We've been focusing on hormones. Vitamin D is actually a hormone too, but it's referred to as a vitamin, and it definitely is involved with many different risk factors. This particular article from the Archives of Internal Medicine refers to the beneficial effect that vitamin D has on decreasing cardiovascular mortality as well as mortality from all other causes. Here are some of the conditions associated with having less vitamin D than is optimal. That doesn't necessarily mean it's in the low range. Most labs consider the normal range for vitamin D to be between 30 and 100. A lot of these conditions develop in patients that have more than 30 on a lab test, but they have less than the optimum, which is considered to be between 75 and 100 by most knowledgeable doctors these days. So you can see vitamin D deficiency or suboptimal vitamin D status is associated with 9 different cancers. It's associated with musculoskeletal conditions, with gastrointestinal conditions, with autoimmune disease, neurological disease, skin disease, other hormonal imbalances, and cardiovascular disease. I mean, this is one of the most important vitamins you could possibly be taking. And nobody in our culture, from my experience and my practice, has optimal levels of vitamin D without taking supplemental amounts. Here's a graph to show how increasing the level of vitamin D decreases the risk of various diseases. So you see the vertical black line here is between 24 and 26, right about 25. That for a long time was considered to be the range that they were striving toward. And you'll see that the disease in the bottom, rickets, that's a bone disease that develops from vitamin D deficiency. The current recommended daily allowance of vitamin D is 400 IUs a day. That's the amount that's necessary to keep you from getting rickets. And taking 400 IUs a day results in a blood level of about 25, and that prevents about 99% of rickets. If you want to prevent any of these other diseases, you need to take enough vitamin D so that it results in a blood level of at least 54 or 55%. A blood level of 54 or 55 on a lab test. And here are some references for the previous chart. So what type of vitamin D and how much? Well, vitamin D3 is superior to D2. Again, the recommended daily allowance is 400 IUs a day, but most people need at least 5 times that much to maintain optimal vitamin D levels. That means 2,000 IUs a day, bare minimum. And more patients that I see need at least 5,000 IUs a day. Some need 7,000 IUs a day. But it is possible to get too much vitamin D. So you want to make sure that you do your vitamin D supplementation program with the assistance of a doctor that knows how to do it. What about sunshine and vitamin D? Well, it's only the ultraviolet light in sunshine that's capable of making vitamin D, and sunscreen prevents the ultraviolet light from getting through to the skin. And the ultraviolet light only makes vitamin D when it interacts with cholesterol oil on the surface of the skin. So first you have to get hot, sweaty, and greasy in the sun before vitamin D can even start to be made. Then you have to stay hot, sweaty, and greasy long enough for the vitamin D to be made and then be reabsorbed. And it takes 24 to 48 hours to absorb the vitamin D back across your skin into your body. So most people take a shower at the end of a hot, sweaty day, and they wash 95% of the vitamin D right down the shower drain. So that's why nobody in our culture that has proper hygiene, at least, has optimal levels of vitamin D. I've had 2 patients that play tennis 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And when I tested their vitamin D levels, they were found to be in the mid-40s. Now, that was about twice as good as most of my patients who are in the mid-20s. But it was about half of what they should have to decrease the risk of breast cancer by 75% and prostate cancer by 75%, which is a blood level value of 75 on a lab test. So the best lab test to do is 25 OH vitamin D. As I mentioned before, the normal range is 30 to 100, but optimal range is 75 to 100. And most of my patients that I've tested have levels in the low to mid-20s. And if you work or play outside several hours a day, several days a week, then you might have levels in the 40s, possibly even 50. But even then, you're suboptimal because the optimal range starts at 75. So first you need a vitamin D test, and then based on how much you have in your body, I determine how much vitamin D a patient needs. Generally, we dose with 50,000 IUs 1 day per week for up to 8 weeks. Some patients need less than that, some need more. A maintenance dose needs to be at least 2,000 IUs a day. Most patients need about 5,000 IUs a day. And then we recommend retesting in 6 to 8 months, and then we can tweak the dosage up or down accordingly. We mentioned the normal or optimal doses up to 100. You don't get any risk of vitamin D toxicity unless your blood levels are over 200. So this is still a very safe margin away from toxic levels of vitamin D. Pregnant women need to be particularly careful about this and follow the recommendations of their OBGYN, because vitamin D toxicity can lead to serious complications for the fetus. So there are specific recommendations for pregnant women, and you need to consult your OBGYN on that and not listen to any of my recommendations if you're pregnant. Well, something else that increases the risk of cancer is HPV, or human papillomavirus. This is typically an infection of the cervix of the uterus, and the risk is greatly enhanced in women that have low levels of folic acid, as well as in women with multiple sexual partners. And one thing you should also realize is that 30% of the population can't utilize folic acid properly. They need a different form of folate. They need something called 5-MTHF, which stands for 5-methyl-tetrahydrofolate. This is a different form of folate that bypasses that genetic short circuit that 30% of men and women have that prevents them from being able to utilize folic acid. Increased intake of folic acid and or 5-MTHF has been found to reverse cervical dysplasia in many women and reduces the risk of cervical cancer. So supplementing your diet with 5-MTHF is really helpful, especially if you've been found to have HPV infection. Most people don't know if they have that genetic inability to utilize folic acid, so I recommend that most people just take the modified form of folate so that in case you're one of those 30%, we've got you covered. If you're not one of those 30% and you could utilize regular folic acid, you can still use the 5-MTHF form as well. So let's review some of the proactive steps you can take to help decrease your risk of cancer. You can minimize environmental toxins, minimize dietary toxins, optimize hormonal balance through salivary testing, interpreted by a doctor who knows how to work with these things with natural bioidentical hormones, nutritional support for hormonal detoxification, hormone repletion with bioidentical hormones, maintaining healthy body composition, supplement with vitamin D, and 5-methyl-tetrahydrofolate as a form of folate. So thank you very much for your attentiveness. I know this has been a rather long webinar, but it's very, very important. As you see this picture here with the shark under the wave, that's the way cancer can be. Hidden beneath the surface where nobody knows it's there, developing. Everybody, it's been found, develops cancer cells. Those with healthy immune systems, the immune system is able to detect the cancer cells and kill them before it turns into a case of cancer that's diagnosable. So all of us are at risk. It's important that we all plan ahead and take appropriate steps now. If you wait until you have cancer, it's oftentimes too late to do anything about it that's effective. These natural approaches are effective in preventing cancer. They're not to be considered to be effective in cancer treatment. Although they may be helpful, they're not for cancer treatment. They're effective for cancer prevention. So I hope you'll all take heed and start implementing some of these changes into your diet and lifestyle right away. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. Look forward to our next webinar together. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.